All right, welcome back to the Real Quick with Mike Swick podcast. Today we have a very special guest that I'm a big fan of because he created one of the greatest shows on TV, one of the greatest shows, in my opinion, on TV, and one of the greatest films, Entourage. I grew up with a big passion for film. That was kind of what drove me to be a fighter. I wanted to be a fighter, make a name as a fighter, and then hopefully after I had a name, that would be an easier into Hollywood where I could go and be Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal and Van Damme and all the guys I watched when I was coming up, and then finish out my life as this action star. So it always was a passion. And then, Doug Ellin came along and created Entourage, which was a great insight to what it was like for, these guys coming in and making it, and it's just fantastic. Big fan of the show. He has a new podcast called Victory the Podcast, where he talks about not only the show, if you're a fan of Entourage, he talks about the show behind the scenes, the casting. I mean, they literally go into such detail of what it's like, but they also cover everything Hollywood. Things that they've done in the past. They talk about their reviews. They talk about the effects of what they do on the show to celebrities by using them or mentioning them. It's a very fascinating podcast called Victory the Podcast. Be sure and check that out. But this is my podcast right now, and I have Doug Ellin on the show, so let's get started. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How's
Thailand going?
Good, man. It's in lockdown right now, but the gym's open, and we're doing business, but there's no one allowed to come in. So, I mean, we're limited on our business. My gym is 100% foreigners. So when there's no foreign flights available, It kind of limits us to people that are stuck in Thailand. So hopefully better soon. But, man.
I think it's about to lock down in LA too. So anyway.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. It's the same thing there, right?
I mean, it's getting worse by the day. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't see how schools are starting. It's all fucked up. So
it's actually getting worse.
Yeah, the numbers are rising. Whatever it means, I don't know anymore how to. You turn on the news, there's different there's different news, so it's hard to figure out what's happening, but it seems like the numbers are going up everywhere. But I don't know, and I can tell people are getting more nervous. People who are starting to relax are going back inside again. So
it's crazy, man. This has been a horrible situation on all fronts, I think.
Yep.
Crazy, man. Well, but it gives you time. And I want to say, you have your podcast out. I've been listening to it on iTunes. I actually left you a review, 5-star review. Amazing podcast. And I want to say, man, I'm not just saying this because I have you on the podcast. Obviously, I reached out to you to be on here, but Entourage literally is one of my favorite shows of all time. Like many kids growing up, being a movie star is like what you dream of, So like I grew up small town Texas. Yeah. And, I wanted to be known and successful for something. I chose the martial arts route, hoping to make a name as a fighter and then transition into film, like some, Chuck Norris, Seagal type situation, and then finish out my life doing film stuff, which I'm still overly fascinated with and want to get into, maybe not acting, but just any facet of it. I'm just so engulfed in the film industry, like I really am. And so Entourage was like the first show that really got to show you kind of that lifestyle and what it's like. And the way you did it, man, was fantastic.
Right. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And it's similar. I mean, to me, the thing was it's similar with athletes as well, the way they kind of live their lives. I think it was very relatable to star athletes as well, who brought their friends from, humble beginnings with them and stuff.
Yeah, I think Ballers, focusing on that, is my second favorite show. It's because it does the same thing. It's just a little bit more catered to my type of career, being it's football, but for fighting. But I mean, the way you interacted with real celebrities, the way you filmed it, and I was going to ask you, why is Hollywood in general so secret? Why is it so hard to get behind the scenes footage and like see how these actors and films are really being made aside from the behind the scenes featurettes on the old DVDs and stuff? It seems like it's very, very hard to get that behind the scenes look until you came out with the show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think most people who are in the business don't really want their personal lives exposed. As much as it helps their business, I think it also hurts their careers. So I think I think people kind of want to do their jobs and let their work speak for themselves sometimes. Although obviously with new Instagram culture, that's different for some people. But I think some of the great actors especially didn't want people to even know their real personalities because it affected how you looked at them on screen.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Do you watch fighting? Do you watch MMA?
I do. I didn't watch the other night, but I normally do watch it. Yeah, and we had Chuck Liddell obviously on Entourage, which was cool. But I've watched it. At least for the past 10 years or so. And I don't know why I didn't watch the fight the other night. I barely didn't turn the TV on, and right now it's just been depressing all the time.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that with Chuck Liddell and then Ronda Rousey obviously entering in the movie. What started that? Like, what brought that idea up to bring on a UFC fighter like Chuck Liddell in the series?
Well, I mean, at the time for Chuck at the time, I mean, he was just blowing up and really, kind of helped make the sport. And we all, just everyone who was working behind the scenes, just loved him and thought it was very cool. So we reached out to him and got him, and thought he was a perfect person to kind of intimidate Johnny Drama and stuff. So, and he was great to have on. With Ronda, I saw her on a Jim Rome interview. I didn't know who she was. I had never seen her fight. And I was like, wow, she's beautiful. Can she really fight? And then I turned on a fight. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So it's amazing her trajectory, because when I saw that, I started writing in the script, and I called Warner Brothers, and I guess the movie that we were shooting in 2014, but nobody knew who she was. They were like, what are you talking about? We're not putting her in this. By the time the movie came out, she was so huge. So it was pretty wild to see how fast. But another one also was so great to work with and awesome to have around.
Yeah, she's amazing. How in the Hollywood scene, how big is the UFC and UFC fighters? I know there's a lot of stunt guys and a lot of stunt coordinators and a lot of fighters sort of making it into some bigger pictures. Like, Ronda's done Expendables, she's done the Fast franchise, she's done Mile 22, obviously some other big films. Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell's done the same. What is the take of this new explosion of MMA in the Hollywood scene?
I mean, I think people love it, and obviously they gravitate like any other thing to the stars when there's, when you have the combination of Conor, when you have the personality and the ability. I think those are the ones that really kind of transcend everything, Ronda and Chuck as well. So, but people love it, I mean, it's weird now because boxing's made a little bit of a comeback. It seemed 5 years ago, at least in my area over here, people were almost over boxing, and MMA was the thing. Now I think it's balanced out a little bit, and people appreciate both, but it's big.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool, man. And then I didn't want to get too much in the details of behind the scenes of Entourage and the making of Entourage in the beginning, because I listened to your podcast, and I want everybody that's listening to this and watching this to go straight to the Victory Podcast and listen to you guys, because it is absolutely amazing. Like the camaraderie between you and Dillon and Connolly, and like now with Jerry when he just popped on the last episode, it's like you're one of the guys, and it's so good to hear the behind the scenes stories. I mean, it goes on far beyond Entourage. Obviously, the Tom Berenger story from Platoon, upsetting real stars like Vince Vaughn, the fights between like you and Dillon and Connolly at like Giorgio's and Maestro's, and like all this stuff. It's like the Hollywood culture, and like you guys are doing a fantastic job of putting that together and making it entertaining. So I want to let everybody go there and hear the real story of Entourage that way.
Thanks. Yeah, please check it out. Victory, the podcast it's called. And, my goal with it was not really to just focus on Entourage. It was because we are friends, and they are the four guys that I cast for the four guys, meaning Adrian, Jerry, Kevin, and Kevin, were basically guys I grew up with. And that's kind of how I was writing the show, how my friends were, and if I was kind of a Mark Wahlberg type, that what stories would happen in there. So, it initially was inspired by Mark and his friends, which I used a lot of elements of that. But it, obviously, since I was writing it, I had to come up with my own take of it. So we used a lot of my friends, and, we kind of from day one got along like that. So what I wanted the podcast to feel like is just an extension of the show a little bit, but guys hanging out and talking about anything from sports to life and whatever. So.
Yeah, that it does. It's amazing. And for someone like me that like grew up in that, wanting to have that lifestyle, it's funny because the show came out in 2004, I think?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
So that was when I got into UFC. Yeah. So having dreamed of like having this, this fame, successful lifestyle and it going more to the UFC style or side instead of Hollywood. When Entourage came out, it was kind of a part of my career, like because as I was fighting in the UFC, I got in the UFC in 2004 off The Ultimate Fighter. Entourage came out, so I was watching every episode, and I was like living vicariously through Vincent Chase as he was accomplishing kind of I mean, to be completely honest with you, that's what I would have wanted to do with my life. You know what I mean? So it's like I was a fighter. I was having success at it, and I was good at it enough to be where at the level I was and competing, and it was making me somewhat famous. But like, I was like looking at that show, and that was like my fantasy. You know what I mean? That was like, wow, I was living vicariously through them and the episodes. It was amazing and inspiring, to be honest, because.
I mean, it's funny because I mean, a lot of athletes say that, and it's weird because actors or writers, directors, they all kind of have this image of swapping. You know, like you wanted to do that, and I don't want to do MMA. I mean, that is the last fucking thing on earth I would want to do because I just think you guys are out of your minds. As much as I love watching it, but all I wanted to do was. And I was never gonna be. So but all I wanted to do was be an athlete when I was growing up. I mean, I would have killed to be a basketball player, hockey player, whatever. Yeah. But you know, so sometimes you want this other lifestyle, but at the end of the day, they're just guys, and it's similar to if one of your friends has success and is willing to help out the other guys, you know.
Yeah, no, I've had actor friends that had David Castaneda on here, JJ Story, a few actors and stuff. Gina Rodriguez was at AK Thailand. So a lot of actors, like you said, want to be fighters, or they're like JJ Story especially. You know, he's from Genified on Netflix, and he's he's the opposite of me. He's an actor and he's having success. He's getting all these films. He's on a hit show on Netflix, but he's like, I want to be a fighter. Like that's, you know, he trains and wants to be a fighter. And I'm like, yeah, you want to be a fighter till you're 35, you know? But like someone asked me recently if I would rather have a world championship belt in fighting or an Oscar. And I said, I'd have to earn it, obviously, but I would take the Oscar, right? Because like that's longevity. That I could do that for, I mean, if I have an Oscar, I can act and do something I love and am passionate about until I'm 60, till I'm 70. Fighting ends. And luckily I found business and I'm doing that. But if I didn't have that, and a lot of fighters don't, what do you do? You know, it's tough.
Yeah, you also don't usually get hurt winning Oscars. Usually, you know. So
true. Fake fighting's better.
I find it fascinating what you guys do, and even, I mean, boxing is crazy enough, but you guys are fucking nuts. I can't believe some of the stuff I watch, but you know, I think that, you know, we're all given a skill. And, you know, your job is to maximize it. And if you have two, which obviously The Rock and whoever else, you know, have had some of that. And, you know, that's the best case scenario. But it's a rare combination to have both. But I think we see it with a bunch. But I don't know, Tyson, I don't even know if it's a joke. Is he fighting again, or is that like a bit?
I'm curious. I never expected Tyson would have a podcast, and it's good. You know, who would have ever expected Tyson to have a podcast? But he has a really good one, you know? And now he's doing all these training videos with Holyfield.
Mike was on the show, and I also did a pilot with Mike with Spike Lee. Yeah. And he's got just an amazing personality. And he's funny, and he's thoughtful. And I think he's a very different guy than he was 25 years ago, you know? And so he has a cartoon also. I don't know if it's still going, but it was funny. And, you know, he's awesome.
And most importantly, he's absolutely like honest. Like he doesn't care. He will say how he feels, what he did in the past, what he will do now. He has no like filter whatsoever, and that's incredible.
I know and those are the best. I just wonder if he's really going to fight. I mean, I'm curious. I kind of hope not, because I don't want to see anything happen to him, and maybe he'll still be able to win. I was trying to figure out, when did Foreman? Like, was Foreman in his 40s when he came back? Because it feels like he was old, but that's...
You know, I don't want to see it, because I think he might... I mean, looking at these latest training videos, I think he might kill someone. Like, because he would have to fight somebody old, right? He would have to fight Evander, somebody in the same age group. And, like, I don't know if somebody at that age group can take that kind of power punch. Like, have you seen him on the mitts lately? Like, Jesus Christ, man. Yeah. He was knocking people out in their 20s. Imagine a 60-year-old, I mean, not 60, but I mean like a 40, 50, you know what I mean? Like, they take a hit like that, they could die. Like, it could be.
Well, it's so funny, though, that Mike is like, what, hasn't fought in 10 years at least, 15 maybe? I don't even know. But I'm working on a script right now with Thierry Henry, inspired in the international football world. But I just wrote a line. He hits harder than Mike Tyson. So it's amazing how his legacy endures, and you kind of still think about him first when you think of heavyweights, you know?
fighters get a lot of respect, and he was one of the greatest. And like, I watched this podcast with Eminem, and I sat there and watched Eminem just like fanboy out on him the whole time. Like literally, he was just like, look, man, I'm like such a big fan. I can't believe I'm sitting here. And it's like Eminem, you know, like the best at what he does ever, you know, and it's like, that shows you that, I guess when you're good at something and it's knocking people unconscious, that puts you on a different level, you know, like the way he did, especially.
Sure.
It's a different kind of respect.
Everything about it. And again, it's like I said, personality combination with the talent, you know, he had both. And, you know, I remember, I was working in New York City. I think, a freshman in college, and I had to run back to Long Island to go to class, and then run back into the city to watch Tyson Spinks on, you know, closed circuit at, I think, the Friars Club or something. And like, I walked in, and everyone was like, he's down, which I thought was a joke. But I got there late after like a 2.5 hour back and forth to Long Island to see Tyson knock out Spinks in like whatever it was, 35 seconds.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So it was incredible.
Yeah, and you're right. We're crazy. I mean, you can't argue. I've never been in street fights. I'm not like the Masvidal kind of guy, you know, the hard up guy. But like, obviously, when I dream of, you know, as a kid growing up in Texas, to be someone like Vincent Chase, and I find myself fighting highly trained men in cages as a career, something obviously went wrong along the path of life. You know what I mean? So maybe there's a little crazy up there in my head, even though I don't realize, you know. So it's, yeah, you're right. Listen, you're
right. You got a skill, and you reached your potential. But yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to even comprehend that life. And I grew up with a lot of tough kids who were crazy fighters, and I was never really like a fighter. I had the friends that would, if anyone came after me, they'd jump in and kick the shit out of people. But it's incomprehensible what you guys are doing with no glove. It's nuts. I don't know, but you look good though. So your face is lasted, which is key. You know, good teeth still. It's just all good. You know?
My goal was to never look like a fighter. I just wanted to be one. So I was always trying like not to get hit, like drain my ears if they puffed out. Like I knew I never fought to end my life fighting. I wanted to fight to do it and then get into something else. And it turned out to be business, and that was a great decision, obviously. But I still want to venture into film in some facet, some way. It's a huge fascination of mine. I want to ask you though, because I was listening to the podcast, and I'm not going to give anything away because I want people to watch it, or listen to it. But you started kind of, I'm going to prelude a little bit to where you started, because you started with Mark Wahlberg and Stephen Levinson coming to you with the idea of which you famously said you didn't like. What put you in the position where they came to you with that idea? I wanted to ask you. Obviously, that was a big position when Mark Wahlberg and Stephen Levinson's coming to you with an idea. And then also, what was it that you didn't like?
Well, at the time, Mark and Steve hadn't done TV yet. So Mark was a big movie star, and Steve was his manager. But I had worked with Steve for years before. He's a friend of mine from college. Oh, cool. And he was my manager as well. So he produced a movie that I directed, and we worked on a couple other things together. But I wrote a Curb Your Enthusiasm spec script, which means I sat down and just wrote a script based on Curb, not to sell it to anybody, just to show people I'm funny. Even though, by the way, I was already 10 years into the business, had made 2 movies, had written 5 studio scripts, but still, you have to just keep showing. So I had given it to Steve. And Steve said, Mark and I were thinking about this idea. And there was not really an idea. It was just like Mark has a group of friends that were really funny and entertaining, and Mark would film them. So it was like, how do we turn this into a scripted show? Which, you know, an idea is one thing, and execution, as you know, is everything. Because there's, you know, the ideas are, you know, a million people could do the same thing, and they would all look differently. So that's where we started. And they were both pretty great from the start. You know, it was kind of it just kind of worked. It was a match made in heaven, and they were happy with what I was doing, and they gave me freedom and gave me great ideas. And Mark was a amazing producer and helping us get things going, selling it, and getting the you know, cast we needed and all that stuff. So
yeah, that's awesome. And man, what a hard worker he is too. It's like he's in so many movies, and then he's like producing so many other things like Ballers and obviously the Entourage, and then he seems to be like never sleeping. Like he seems to be, and he has a car dealership too, and Wahlburgers. I mean, it's crazy.
What?
And Wahlburgers and a car dealership. It's like all that stuff. It's like he must be so busy.
He's unreal, very driven guy, and you know, I see his 4 a.m. workouts, and it makes me feel like shit all the time when I see it. So.
Him and The Rock, man. It's like they're my inspiration as I'm getting older, and I'm an athlete, and I'm still like, having to try to push myself to like stay in great shape, and because I do believe that the better shape you are, it's everything. How hard you push for your body is the same as how hard you push in work, and I can go have a good workout and make myself confident for the rest of my day and my business decisions because I achieve my goal first in the morning by getting my workout. So I do see the pattern there. There is something to it.
And even more base now. It's just this COVID shit is really, affecting people who are less healthy worse. Yep. So it is. I mean, I've tried really hard, and I'm not you or Wahlberg or even close, but I've tried really hard during the whole lock-in to get as healthy as I can. I'm 52 years old now, and every year you get older, this disease, which, can get you worse. So I'm trying my best to get as healthy as I can get right now. And, it used to be kind of people think it was just for looks, but the truth is it really is like about everything that you do. And so I'm doing my best. So
it's mental and confidence. If you set a goal out to work out and you achieve that goal, it builds your confidence, and I think all that stuff adds up. Being a fighter and stuff and having my career, there was obviously that point in my career where I realized that I kind of made it as far as in that realm. Like I had a goal when I wanted to be a fighter, what I wanted to accomplish. And then there was that point in my career where I was like, okay, I did it. Or I've arrived to what I dreamed of or surpassed it, whatever the case. What about you? Like, 'cause when you had Entourage, I know it was probably a lot harder than people think getting it going, especially with HBO and everything, getting it going, getting it on TV, casted, everything else. Yeah. Do you remember that point where you were just like, from being a writer to being a creator and basically doing all the stuff you did to build this show and it becoming such a big hit that you were like, wow, man, I've made it or I've arrived?
I mean, I remember, the New York Times was like, you wanted that review.
Yeah.
When the review came out for the show, which said it was the best show on TV in 2003 or 2004, it made me feel good for about 5 minutes, but I've always been a very kind of negative, what's next and not looking back kind of person. So I appreciated it for a minute, but honestly, I don't know. People always ask me this. Like nothing really changed for me, except for I had more money, which was nice. But I never sit around and was like, oh, we got this great hit or we do this, because every time I would sit down to write a script, it was the same anxiety, which I don't know if you have, when you get in the ring.
Absolutely.
It was the same anxiety of like, okay, I got to make this great. And I don't mean because anybody else thinks it, because even the movies I did where, people criticize or whatever, you do the best you can. And if you really put your hard work in, it's like a fight. We know these fighters come in. Sometimes they get knocked out in 30 seconds and people are like, oh, they suck.
Right.
No, they don't suck.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're tops in the world. There's just one guy who's just better. Yeah. But so I never really have sat back and thought about, oh, wow, I made it or I did this. I kind of always just try to do the best I can, and that's it,
Yeah, and you've done a fantastic job with that. What advice would you give to somebody coming into Hollywood trying to be Vincent Chase now that you've kind of wrote the life, the best of anyone of what it's like? What's your advice to somebody coming to Hollywood to try to make it in the movies that can pertain to pretty much anyone?
I never think anybody should come into any business like to be a movie star or to be a this. I think it's got to be, and like you said, you wanted to do other things. There are a lot of other things I would have preferred to do. I didn't have the skill set to do them. So I think you go into this business if you really love it, and if there's really no other options, because it's a tough business, and obviously you have a similar thing there. The amount of money that most people make in writing or directing is really, it's below the poverty line. So you have to be in this because you love it, not for money, not for fame. And if you're lucky enough that things like that come along, great. But I think you really have to love the process for it to be something that you can do,
And when you say love the process, what do you mean by that? Like what do you love? So obviously you can write for days and days and days and not get anything out of that. What is it that has to happen for you to feel successful at what you wrote or to feel that love that you're talking about?
Well, like I said, I mean, I started as a stand-up comedian, and I was the guy who, if there was one guy not laughing out of however many, that was the guy I focused on. So I don't really have that. The things that I love, writing has never been something I love. Directing, being on the set, the camaraderie, similar to a sports thing. Writing was always the way to get to what I did love, which was being on the set and making things happen, because it's not painting. You know, it's not something you can do on your own. You need a lot of people and a lot of collaboration, and you need a lot of luck. So to me, though, there's nothing like when you get a scene done that you like, and then you get on with the proper actors and you see them elevate it to something even better. That's what I love.
And then when the New York Times writes about it in a positive way, that's even better.
Yeah, and by the way, that's not to. Another thing you have to do is not really take that for what it was worth. It was great to me because I was like, my parents are going to wake up and read this. It's awesome. And the New York Times wrote about a movie I wrote that it was not releasable. They said, how did this fucking movie get in a movie theater? So a movie I did earlier. So you can't take the negative or the positive too seriously. But I was a lot of my life was motivated by my parents not freaking telling me I was doing nothing, because they kind of, when I graduated college and said I'm going to LA to be a stand-up comedian and make movies, my parents thought I was out of my mind. And you got to remember, this is 1990. Yeah. There's no Instagram, there's no social media, right. And I had nothing to do with the film business. Not a single person I knew growing up, not my parents. So they didn't even understand what I was talking about, and they just spent a lot of money on college education that they thought was going to go in the trash. So it is about finding the path and really sticking to it. And, when you said, what about Hollywood? And again, people can do it in different ways. I came here and my head was down. I got married very young, and I was focused on work back then. I was just like figuring out how I could make things happen in a very difficult business. I wasn't here for any of the other stuff,
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's usually, passion has to drive everything, and when I came to Thailand to build a gym, same thing, people didn't realize what I was trying to do, but I was passionate about it, and that's what carried me on.
What's up, everybody? I am here in Thailand. This is the first time I've ever been here. Been dying to come here for years. The great Mike Swick, he's one of the big reasons he's been trying to pull me down here. What he built down here, AKA Thailand, is incredible. There's people here from all over the world. You can train mixed martial arts here, jiu-jitsu. They have weightlifting, they have cardio, and obviously they have Muay Thai, boxing, everything. I'm telling you guys, I know everybody wants to go to Thailand because Thailand's so cool, but you can't come to Thailand without coming to AKA Thailand. Come on.
One thing from your podcast that I caught on to, and I need to get your advice on, I think, before I get into trouble. So you were talking about how y'all had mentioned Vince Vaughn and he had got upset, and certain other actors. Then you said that you had mentioned, I think it was Stephen Levinson's assistant or somebody that worked with him, and you had to get permission to use the name. How does that work? Because you mentioned something about being a public figure and it's okay. And so I'm assuming now that like if I was to mention somebody that wasn't a public figure and say something, that could probably be deemed, I assume, as slander or defamation. So is it, how do you determine who's a public figure? And can I just talk about any public figure?
Yeah, now again, different things. Like public figures are open to different things. You can't say a public figure did something they didn't do, right? That's different than saying a public figure is fat or ugly or whatever.
Right.
So,
or that you don't like them or whatever.
But as far as having a private figure, if you have a character playing somebody, you can't do that unless you get their permission. So if it's a friend of yours from high school, you need them to sign off something.
Gotcha.
The public figure, there's more leeway, but still you can't slander them and say, oh, he murdered someone in Hawaii in 1985. You know what I mean?
Comedians can. Comedians get away with that.
What?
Comedians get away with that. Comedians say everything they want that's not true, and that's perfectly fine. Comedians can. You were a comedian, so tell me this: a comedian can say the exact same thing I could say on this podcast because I'm not a comedian, and I would get completely demolished for saying something like Anthony Jeselnik would say, right? Like, it seems like
you know what? I mean, I guess, listen, it depends. I mean, how things are phrased, and obviously we're in a culture right now that anything you say can be, but I don't know. Part of it is, Chappelle. Yeah. He has a way of phrasing things that they're very intelligent and funny at the same time. So he's got more leeway than somebody else might. But at the end of the day, I don't think Chappelle's saying anything that's racist or slanderous. I don't think. I'd have to listen to everything he says. But I mean, but you can get away with things when you're making jokes, but also you can't. Comedians are getting killed. I mean, for things they said 25 years ago.
That's
they're
true.
Coming after them right now. So, it's a very weird time right now. And again, for me, someone's personal views are very different than what a character says. That has nothing to do with anything.
Right.
Martin Scorsese writes, Italian characters in the 70s saying certain things.
That's fine.
That doesn't mean Martin Scorsese agrees with them or that all Italian people saying that agrees with them, but it just becomes a weird dynamic. And, but you do have to be careful right now. It's just a really crazy time, and it also is it's an important time. I think like right now we're going to look back in this on history, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Hopefully we end up in a better place, but still a place where artists, comedians are free to experiment and be funny, and everybody stops being so offended by everything,
Yeah, I agree with you. I wanted to ask you something about that as well from Entourage then and now. But before that, going on what you were saying, Joe Rogan, obviously the king of podcasts, signed a deal with Spotify for an enormous amount of money. And now there's like this whole coalition of people trying to get him to lose that deal because of something that happened like 10 years ago that he didn't even say, that Joey Diaz said. Yeah. And it was probably just laughable comedy talk or whatever else, but it was kind of on that borderline Me Too thing. And then Joe Rogan laughed about it, and people are like wanting him to lose the entire deal because he laughed at just some random thing that they were just joking about 10 years ago. So I can see what you're saying. It's like, it's crazy, like how you got to be careful. And then I wanted to ask you, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's fortunately for Joe, it's a different time for him because he's got his own followers. He doesn't need anybody. It still sucks that people come at him like this. But Howard Stern dealt with that for 20 years when he actually, could be taken off the radio, could be fined by the government, could be all of this. So, I think obviously Joe will be fine. We know that, but it's nuts. I mean, it just is, and you saw it with the Billy Bush situation. Billy Bush laughed at something President Trump said. Trump went on to become the fucking president, and they basically banned Billy Bush. Hopefully he's back now, but 5 years for kind of you could say anything. He was just trying to kiss his ass. He was just trying to whatever. He didn't really comment on anything. So I think it's a scary time. So, but you do have to be thoughtful about what you say, and you got to be a little careful about it. But there is a group out there that's just desperate to find the next person they can go after and attack,
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, because you being a writer and now dealing with all this, obviously you wrote a lot more loose with Entourage, the series. You look at, when I look back at some of the things the guys said back then and the talk, which was 100% accurate and 100% real and still the same, I think today, no different, most of what I remember. Are you scared as a writer to just be free with your writing and have to double check even more now, just in case someone, not that you're going to say something wrong, but that they might take it that you're saying something wrong and then it might set you back? Is that a big issue for you right now, being a writer?
I mean, it's not so much. I mean, look, I'm 52 now. I was in my 20s when I was starting writing that. I just wouldn't write stuff like that, not because of society or anything. It's just different from me. But of course, you think about what you say and what you do and blah, blah, blah. But, Entourage, again, was a very critically acclaimed show at the time. It wasn't just like the stupid naked women running around. It was universally acclaimed and reviewed. There has been some revisionist history that it's disgusting and it's misogynistic and this and that, which, is upsetting because it wasn't. And I, believe me, took a lot of care to make sure that these guys, while they said guy talk, they were never aggressive or acting in a way that would be inappropriate. So, I mean, that was my PC mind at the time. But I wouldn't write stuff like that. And I haven't looked back at the show in years until we started doing this podcast. And there's stuff that I look at that I go, gee, whoa. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It just wouldn't fly today. And it's not that I go, oh, that's so sad, because times change. And they've changed more in the last 7 years. I mean, there's classic movies I watch now, Airplane, which I go, oh, I've seen the movie 5,000 times. I've never thought anything of anything in it. Now you go, whoa, it's a little bit like this. Or, Eddie Murphy's old concerts that I knew line for line for line in 1983.
Yeah.
You now look back at, but that's, to me, the point. You don't really look back and go and judge them as in today's standards. You judge them for the time and what was going on and what did people at the time think about it. So, 60 whatever, when Lenny Bruce was coming, comedians couldn't even curse. So they helped push the boundaries and really help inform and shift society to some degree. And we're just going to have to see where it shakes out right now. I think there is a reasonable balance between comedy and offending people, so we'll find out how it goes.
Yeah, I think there was a part on your podcast where Kevin Dillon didn't want to repeat a line from Platoon. And even though Platoon was an epic classic film, you know what I mean? But it's just super sensitive right now. But Kevin seems like a super cool guy, both of them, Connolly and Dillon. But I would love to talk to Kevin Dillon one day. That'd be great to have him on the show eventually.
He'd love it. I'm sure he would love it.
Yeah. Is there anybody? Because I know in the film there was something like 50 cameos or so in the film from celebrities, other stars, and stuff. Is there anyone that you can name that turned it down? Is there any celebrities that said no to a part or to a cameo for Entourage, or was everybody just game?
I mean, no. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I know we reached out to Michael Jordan. We reached out to Tiger Woods at one point, Jimmy Page. But, yeah, we had some no's, Russell Crowe. I mean, it wasn't like, I got them on the phone and they were like, no, I'll never do your show. It's just, we called agents or whatever it was and didn't get a response back. So, but we had a lot of great ones and a lot of people. It really started, by the time of the movie, people were calling us, I mean, like Gronkowski, for instance, his manager, awesome. Was friends with Mark, and he said, Rob wants to be in the movie. He's bringing Julie into the set today. We're like, great, so we put him in. So it was kind of like that. And honestly, the whole show, and, Rob, who told me Gronkowski, who told me when he was in the movie, he said, I told my friends in high school that I was going to be on Entourage. And they thought I was fucking crazy, which that story is both amazing because Gronkowski and also crazy because I'm like, oh my God, I've gotten old somehow.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was watching this in high school and now as a Hall of Fame football player with Super Bowl titles and everything. But, that was kind of a lot of the things I got from a lot of the great athletes, which made me feel good. LeBron James, when I met him, told me this is my E and this is my turtle and this is my drama. So I think athletes especially, which Entourage is, I think, kind of began with athletes, and boxers especially. And, it is that camaraderie of people from working class places that bring a crew with them. And sometimes, like in LeBron's case, their crew actually is beneficial, So that was the whole kind of impetus for the whole show.
Yeah, absolutely. And then is Entourage done? I mean, is there any parts or future things happening with Entourage, or is it for sure done? Are we ever going to see any kind of, I don't know, spinoff or something?
I mean, I want to do an animated show with Dillon Connolly possibly, but I can't see doing any more Entourage. I mean, we're all a little past that,
I just love the concept, and I hate to see the concept die. Even if it's an all new cast, I just hate to see that concept die because it is such a great look into something you never get to see.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought about an animated Entourage with the original guys would be great, but I don't know. I don't know. It was to be honest, I didn't even want to do the movie. I mean, I was kind of like. done with it. And I'm glad I did it, even though it was not well received, which whatever. You know, it was a great time making it, but I didn't want to do it anymore. I thought we ended the show great, and it was time to, you know, say goodbye. And actually, I said at the time, I said, the only thing I'd really want to do is an animated version where you could, you know, Vince wants to go to Mars one day or some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like things that you couldn't do on a live action thing.
It's crazy talking to successful guys. Like, I don't know what's with you Hollywood guys, but you saying that you didn't want to do the movie. Like, I talked to JJ, another friend of mine that's doing Genified, and he's like, you know, it's okay, but yeah, I'd rather be a fighter than. It's crazy that, like, I mean, you are passionate about doing what you're doing, but it's like, it's also kind of like, if it happens, it happens. If not, if not. You know, it's such a different kind of, I guess, chase than it is as being a fighter.
Well, again, it's not to say, because obviously, if you're going to be a professional athlete, you have to have the physical talent to start with. So that's you're out of the gate if you don't. Then you have to have the work ethic also. But the difference is, if you're a great basketball player, there's nothing to talk about. If you get on or, you know, especially fighting, actually, if you can get in a fight and you win, there's nothing to talk about. Nobody has to say, I was bored by the first 20 minutes. I was this or that. So with getting a movie or a television show made, the amount of hoops that you have to jump through, the amount of person's feelings and comments that you have to deal with. And that's why I say Entourage was extra satisfying when it came out, because I don't even think HBO thought it was good, you know? And, you know, my agents, they have a thing called coverage, where they have a person read the script and then write up what they think about it. And I have it somewhere, but the coverage on Entourage, which was before we ever even got picked up, it was so bad and so insulting to me as a human.
Wow. As
a 28-year-old going like, you know, if you're in a fight, you go, well, let's get in the ring and we'll decide who the better fighter is. You're waiting for someone to tell you whether they think it's good or not. Yeah. You know, and one of the great things I think that's going on in the world now is, because, you know, my whole career started with a short film, but that short film was enormously difficult to put together in 1990. You know, it cost me $12,000, which is like 50 now, took 8 months. Now I could do the same thing with an iPhone and a few $100s, you know? So the world has changed, and that's a good thing for that. But still, you know, like I said, I'm working on this show with Thierry Henry now. We'll send the script out. It's the amount of people whose commentary I have to listen to and who have to decide, you know, which even, by the way, when I've already done it for 15, 20 years, when I've been nominated for X, Y, and Z, they'll still go read it and go, I don't like it, you know? And it's not a personal thing. It's like, okay, you don't like it, who cares? But it is, when they're the people who can determine whether it gets made or not, it's an incredibly frustrating process. And why I say there's so much luck involved, I don't think anyone at HBO, besides Chris Albrecht, really believed in the show. And if he wasn't there, it just would have died, and that would have been the end of it. And then after it came out, for a decade, you know, Entourage was the show that was getting pitched around town. It's this and Entourage, including bowlers, by the way. It's this in sports. It's Entourage in this. It's Entourage here.
Right.
So it's a pretty wild process, and some of the best shows in history had similar paths. Seinfeld was almost canceled, and the critics didn't like it when it came out. So The Office, I think The Office was critically well received, but it really didn't have great ratings. And then now on Netflix, it's bigger than it ever was before. Right. So that's, I guess, the difference. If you can get out and hit 50% of your threes and play some defense, you know, you're gonna play basketball. You're not gonna have to listen to all the other nonsense. So that's why it's a business that requires persistence and thick skin and not taking things personally. And you know,
I can see with all the success you've had, and then how hard it was, probably the ups and downs of putting, you know, 96 episodes of Entourage together and then doing the film and this stuff. But is there something you look forward to, kind of, maybe not next, but an end game? Like where, what would you like to do, kind of, to enjoy your life, either outside of work or with work in the future from here on, considering you've already kind of done all that?
I mean, I got to tell you, like, I started, as I said, as a comedian and wanted to be like Seinfeld.
Right.
And I didn't continue on that path because I didn't like I'm not saying I would have been Seinfeld anyway, but I didn't like the lifestyle of being in comedy clubs at 3 o'clock in the morning and this and that. It just wasn't for me. But the podcast, I mean, was something I wanted to do since I was a kid. Talk show, radio show, and
cool.
People have been asking me for 5 years to do a podcast, and I didn't really even understand what it was. And I guess I missed the boat to some degree that this was an avenue for people to kind of express them. I enjoy this, very much. It doesn't feel like work, which is what work is. Great work is supposed to feel like you're enjoying it. So hopefully this can last. And as far as movies and TV shows, I'm working on a few things, but I don't. The anxiety of getting back into running a show again, which is it for me anyway, was a 24/7 job. I don't wake up dreaming about that. I do the best I can with what I've got, and then if something goes, I will put it all into it. But I don't dream about that. I would much prefer to be doing what Joe Rogan does than to be sitting in a room by myself writing all the time. So that's my thoughts.
I'm with you, man. And I love business. It's challenging for me. I'm still grinding and getting that done. But I love this, man. I love talking to you and being able to reach out and have great guests, interesting guests to talk to about things that I'm passionate about. Sitting here at 12 a.m. in Thailand, but I couldn't be doing something better than having this conversation right now. This is awesome.
Right.
It's great. And I think that's you got to be passionate about what you do. And but I got to ask you, have you been to Thailand before? I mean, obviously I'm in Thailand right now, so I have to ask if you've been there, if you've ever traveled there, or is it on your agenda to go to Thailand or no?
100%. 100%. My family was there last year, I think. I'm dying to go. I mean,
so you did want to go? Okay, cool.
It's weird. It's weird with all the travel. Because I finally at 50, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to travel. Like, I've been wanting to get to Australia my entire life. Have not made it there, which is nuts. I would love to see Thailand, Australia, and hopefully we get back to normal soon and I can do that.
Cool, man. Well, I know we follow each other on Instagram and stuff, and if you do get a date to come to Thailand and Phuket, I'll show you around, man. I'll show you all the cool places, and I've been here for
awesome.
10 years, man. I'll give you a great vacation. You'll have a great time. So I definitely want to say thank you. And I also want to get back. I lost my train of thought on the podcast thing, but I do want to say you having the passion for being a podcast host or having a podcast, you do really, really well, man. I really love your podcast.
Thanks.
And that's sincere. And then also, you're really well you think really well. I watch some podcasts sometimes, and it's like the guys go on a conversation, and they bring up a point, and then they start getting sidetracked on another point, and then they never get back to the original thing. And you have a great job of always getting back to that original thing and never leaving anyone hanging. And I appreciate that because that's what started the conversation in the first place. And so many people just get wrapped up in talking, and I'm trying to pass time and say something funny, and they never get back to what the story was in the beginning because they keep getting sidetracked. So I love your show. I love listening to y'all. And it sounds like you could have been one of the guys on the show the whole time.
I mean, Eric and Ari were kind of combinations of my own personality in certain ways, but I appreciate that because, Connolly and Dillon are both so fucking ADD that I say it to them. I'm like, we gotta not interrupt each other. They'll say the same thing about me, by the way, but I do try to get it back to, and they're, like I said, they're my brothers and Jerry as well. It's like, that's how I grew up with guys like that. So we have the stories and we see each other like when you see your best friends from high school. It's just no time passes and it's just a good time. So hopefully people will check it out. Victory, the podcast. And please tune in.
We will promote this and we'll put all your stuff on the bottom, the link to your podcast and everything. And I greatly appreciate you taking out the time, man. I know you're a busy man and thank you so much for taking out the time for coming and being on my show. I really appreciate it. This is something I love to do and it's been a great conversation, man.
Awesome. Stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Doug. All right, well, there you have it. Doug Ellin. Wow. Great conversation with somebody who I never thought I would talk to. I saw his name as a creator of Entourage well more than 96 times. I've watched episodes more than once, and then the film as well. And I never thought I'd sit and have an hour-long conversation with him, and that was really cool. it was very inspiring. To me, I take inspiration from many different things, and watching his show, about someone coming up in Hollywood and making it. Anytime there's a show about somebody becoming successful and achieving their goals, that's super inspirational to me. And it happened to play out exactly during my UFC career. 2004 to 2011 was in the middle of my UFC career, the start to the middle of my UFC career. And it was a great show that I look forward to watching, and it has been a great conversation to talk to, and I hope you guys took a lot from it and enjoyed it as well. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know who you'd like to see next. Just to give you a heads up, we have Anthony Pettis coming up next if everything stays as planned. So he will be the next guest on the show. If you're listening on the sound platforms, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, you can subscribe there as well. You can leave a review on iTunes and other platforms as well. I greatly appreciate it. I love the feedback. I appreciate all the support from you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Real quick, with Mike Swick.